family over. They're
they're not guests, right?
Yeah.
Y'all let family run into the refrigerator without asking?
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely, if I come to your house,
like
I'm fingertipping your lemonade.
Yep.
Sactownsports.com Kings Insider, one of our outstanding insiders. Brenden Nunes with us. Time for his Kings Media exit interview. Brenden, are you fully immersed in all the draft hullabaloo here, sir?
Yeah, what's going on, peeps? I'll take the family label. That's good with me. We can, family. I'm all down.
Yeah. Just be careful, though. Jay, if you let him go into the refrigerator, he's going to get the mayonnaise out, and he's going to, what he's going to do with hot dog there. That's all.
You never know. It depends on my mood. But, I'm starting to get into draft stuff more. Appreciated the guests that you guys had on a little bit earlier, giving a little bit more insight. So I have a decent idea on kind of the prototype of a lot of these guys, but still got to kind of really get into the specifics of their strengths, weaknesses, and, theory craft or come up with some stuff about how they could fit in Sacramento.
Brenden, one of the things we were talking about, and Jay believes that, he doesn't want them to make this pick. He wants to see a trade happen. Where are you leaning? Do you feel like we could get somebody that could actually help us in the immediate, or would you like to see this pick move?
Yeah, I think that it's tough without knowing exactly what these options are, right? Like, obviously, like you laid out, kind of trading or taking it, but what are we talking when it comes to who could they get? Because I would imagine that they'll be very active in the trade market just throughout the course of this entire offseason. And, now this pick becomes available to trade. You can technically, really, you pick for somebody else and then would move that player. This pick could not have been traded during the course of the regular season since it was owed to Atlanta, but fell within those protections. So I, would do everything that I can to make every phone call to try and make improvements through trade. But if they don't like it, if they don't like what those offers are out there or how people are valuing this draft, I think taking somebody at 13, it wouldn't be the wrong decision. I think that there are guys that could end up helping you out. And, they like some of the older prospects in years past. There are some guys kind of there. But I would do everything I can, again, make all those phone calls and try to find a way to flip that and get somebody that can help you a little bit more in the immediate future. But I don't think taking anybody at that spot either would necessarily be a mistake.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Brenden, because, again, I don't have as many assets at my disposal as I'd like. If I do end up making the pick, there's great value there in getting with a draft pick, a player under club control for a while who can help me. So I see the upside there. But as we look ahead and try to figure out what the Kings are going to do, obviously we don't know what Malik's going to do. And obviously if Malik leaves, you can't just draft a replacement. But don't you think that the Kings will have to be mindful of the fact that he might leave when they make that selection, or is that something that you just address in other ways when the time comes?
Yeah, I guess you definitely do have to consider it. It wouldn't surprise me if they kind of still just went best player available. Now it's like a guard and a wing forward or right about the same level for you or in the same tier. I think they should lean towards the wing forward, right? That's definitely where some depth is kind of needed here. But I think that they do kind of have to consider this, and this is what makes it weird, I think people are quick to say they don't need a guard, and it's not just Malik. Like, when we go through these trade conversations, a lot of the hypotheticals are one of Harrison or Kevin Huerter, and usually Davion Mitchell is getting talked about in those conversations. And, if Malik walks, and, I guess then it would make less sense for it to be Huerter and Davion in the trade, but if that's what was asked, point being, I think there's situations quickly with how we're expecting this team to be active and aggressive that it could look really different on what you need by the end of by the time the regular season, preseason comes around. So I don't think that they should necessarily be like, we can't take this position, unless I guess point guard and center are probably really the two that you have locked up. But if they can play next to Fox and Sabonis, I think that's kind of really it for me.
Brenden, how much do you think, watching Dallas, the moves they made and how they've improved, OKC, Minnesota, does that light a fire under Monte McNair to get something done this offseason? Is there an arms race going on that the Kings are, if they're not being a part of, they're being left behind?
And remember, Kyle, Brenden was seriously a big P.J. Washington
He was
guy.
A big P.J. Washington guy also. Okay. All right. What do you think, Brenden?
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, first of all, Dallas is a good example of like the importance of depth. I feel like, I do think that the way the Kings make their next big jump is by adding another star. But I think you kind of got to wait for the right opportunity there and, keep your assets dry so that way you can spend those if the time comes up. But in the meantime, go and make these improvements. Everybody talks about the Nuggets, right? And they got Aaron Gordon they went and traded out for KCP the year before they made the move for Aaron Gordon, so it kind of all gets built over time. And I do kind of think the Kings should, in a way, be running their own race. I think that they shouldn't feel rushed because of the landscape of the Western Conference necessarily. I think they're in an okay spot to compete, even if they ended in that 10 spot. It can be a little bit misleading, but it's a very competitive Western Conference. I think you kind of need to run your own race, though, and not feel sped up by the process, because I think the Kings got a decent window here. Really, I'm looking at, can you make your next jump by the time Keegan starts his next contract? So I'm kind of more run your own race, but the West is going to be competitive. You didn't even mention Memphis in that group. I think Memphis is getting forgot about here. I think they're going to be really, really good next year again. So there's a lot of really competitive teams. What's Houston going to do? So I do think, though, that the Kings just need to kind of worry about themselves, and if they handle everything, that they should be able to compete eventually, but fast-tracking the process, I think, can get you in some trouble sometimes.
All right, Brenden, going to put your feet to the fire here a little bit. You got to make a decision, because we have been having just this white-hot, raging dispute on the show, as you may have heard. You've got Jay and you've got Drapes, and they're both really in favor of bringing in a particular player if you could. And I don't see why you would bring him in. And the player is Josh Giddey. So what does Brenden Nunes say?
I really liked Giddey at the time of the draft, and I'm still interested. I think that the 3-point shooting stuff is a little bit concerning. You've seen, OKC have to go away from him a little bit at times because of some of those spacing concerns, and I think that would still exist to a point in Sacramento. But I think the big upside is just his basketball IQ, and the read and react style that the Kings play. It really feels like he fits into that. Now, the spacing that's a big caveat, because it is such an essential part of being able to play and optimize the powers of Fox and Sabonis, who really are the heads of the snake here. Mm-hmm. Price considered, he is definitely somebody that I'd be interested to call on. I think it's the right type of guy, right? A guy that maybe whatever team he's currently on he could be a little bit cheaper than maybe he typically would because of the situation that he's currently in.
No further questions.
No, that's no further questions. Case closed on that. Case closed.
Yeah.
Brenden, who else is out there that you like? I mean, you like PJ at the trade deadline. You heard us, me and Jay, say we like Josh Giddey. Who's an under the radar guy? That you have your eye on. I'm watching the game last night, and that's why Josh Giddey came to mind. Is there anybody that you're like, he might be a nice fit here in Sacramento?
Can I ask you, James, what do you think of Grant Williams?
Grant's my guy. I would love Grant Williams. Give me Grant Williams any day of the week. Yes, I'm all in on Grant.
Give you a little bit of that dog, right? They need a little bit of that. I wonder a little bit about, I think that just his production has been a little bit of, it's tailed off a little bit in a way, or kind of roles have changed. Obviously, he's been on different spots. Dallas didn't go exactly how you would want there. He's somebody that I would look at a little bit. I think that, in free agency, Derrick Jones Jr., somebody that kind of interests me, but obviously not exactly changing the trajectory of your team here. Bobby Portis fits into that MLE. Sure, I would be surprised if Milwaukee wanted to move on, but I know that's a guy that Kings fans really love. I think that, Bojan Bogdanovic, I know he's not really doing it for New York right now, but again, trying to think of guys that maybe would be a little bit cheaper than their typical, or could outperform the production based on what it might cost you. So those guys kind of interest me a little bit. You could try to look at some of the depth pieces that OKC has a little bit to see if they're able to hold on to guys. But really, I think in free agency, is kind of where I've locked down a couple names that I like a little bit when it comes to some drafts or trade stuff. I think I still got to get a better idea, but I like some of those guys like a Grant Williams, or even like if we had to talk about some backup point guards, if Davion moved on, I'm a Dennis Smith Jr. guy in Brooklyn, for example. What's going to happen with Gary Trent Jr. in Toronto? I think he's somebody I really look at as a potential. Nobody's going to replace Malik Monk, but if you have to try to figure that out, he's somebody that could, maybe fill that void a little bit.
Yes. I know Drapes has talked about him a lot. Now, as you look at the list of things the Kings have to address, Brenden, I know this isn't especially high on there, but they are going to need to address the backup center spot. What do you see as the importance of that? What do you see as potential options?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important. I'm pro bringing Alex Len back. Probably not so much JaVale. Obviously, we kind of also saw how that experiment of sorts worked this year. But I think having Alex back and bringing in another guy could be pretty beneficial there. And you still have that optionality of Trey or Sasha at the backup 5, but I've been a big Mason Plumlee guy before. He's a free agent. And again, though, this is also a spot where, keep in mind some of the names I'm going to mention, I think that opportunity cost factors in here, right? Guys love Valanciunas, but I just don't think that it'd be smart for Sacramento to spend that much of their, the cost opportunity of the money that they have available this offseason on a guy like Valanciunas, who I don't know can give you that many reps alongside Sabonis. So if we're just talking backup minutes here, right? I'm a big Mason Plumlee guy. Drew Eubanks interests me a little bit. I think Andre Drummond has turned himself into a pretty dang good backup center, and is not quite the same Andre Drummond, obviously, that we previously think of, but in a good way in certain aspects. Xavier Tillman is a little bit interesting to me. Was a Kings draft pick before he got traded on draft day, for what it's worth. But I think you have solid backup options there. But I'd be pro bringing Alex back and then, getting another guy to give you some optionality there a little bit, because, I think that those little aspects are important here and can get overlooked. But, there was a time, this last season, but more even so the year before, where it was like, gosh, who is going to play this backup center? And it was just such a mess for a second. So Alex figured out a little bit. I think it would make sense to bring him back and bring in another one of someone in that range that I kind of mentioned there.
Brenden, Keegan's about to turn 24 in August. Will be 25 next year. How critical is this season for him? And do you think this season we will know who Keegan Murray is in his NBA career for the next 5-10 years? Is this how important this season is for him?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to get a better idea with every year that passes. I think the big thing for me still is I need to see kind of some counters worked in here. It seems like typically, he added a little bit of that mid-range game last year. You saw some of the floater, maybe being a little bit more aggressive, but I'd like to really see him embrace that. He should really be the second leading scorer on this team. Like, Sabonis is not a guy that's putting up buckets when it comes to points, right? And that's his role. So I really think Keegan I want to see him have that mindset. I've almost come around to thinking that the two biggest, there's some gameplay stuff. I think the finishing and the handle needs some work, but we've seen him get better over time. I think that could come around, but I kind of think the X factor is his mindset here. Is he willing to be that aggressive? And sometimes, tell him, no, we're not doing that. Domas, come here and set a screen. I got this. And so I need to see him do that a little bit more, because to be honest with you, I still am a little bit skeptical of this all-star ceiling. That 47-point game, 12 made threes or 13, whatever he ended up with at the end against Utah, that stuff's great. There's guys where Malachi Flynn had a 50 ball this year, and I'm not saying he's Malachi Flynn, but guys can get hot, right? I need it to be more consistent. And for me, I think a lot of that is a mindset thing for Keegan. And so I'm curious to see how that goes coming into this year. And also, we're talking about trading for a big name. If that were to happen, I still want to see that mindset there. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'm really looking for if he is going to reach this ceiling that they seem to absolutely love and buy. And I'm starting to, lean into it a little bit more.
Wow. During the regular season, Brenden is, he's a good guy and very supportive. And then the off season, he is going after people. And, Keegan's no Malachi Flynn, I'll tell you that. Wow. I'm just surprised. I appreciate the edge, but it's a bit of a surprise. Hey, can you give us, I know I saw you yesterday and you're doing your research. Do you have a name or two or three that you think, draft wise, that the Kings would be wise to consider? I don't know how far along you are in your draft research, but you have even a couple names that you think the Kings would probably be looking at right now.
Yeah, I think some of these bigs are kind of interesting to me. Like I know earlier that you guys talked about Tristan da Silva with the guest you had on earlier, the guy from Colorado. I think that more and more over time, there's kind of this mold that the Kings have been looking for. I think that you just have to find next to Sabonis, if you're running him at the 5, a 4 that can space the floor, protect the rim, and also defend on the perimeter. And it's a very hard thing to find in the current NBA, but I think as more draft classes come in, you're going to see more and more of these guys, bigger players that got used to playing that sort of style since they were young. And I think there are a couple of those, the Tristan da Silva falls into that. I'm a little interested in Kyle Filipowski, the Duke guy. It's some size that I think the Kings could use. There are questions there for sure, but it interests me a little bit. And if you wanted to go a little bit smaller as well, which I understand some of the concerns with that, but obviously what we talked about of how these guards could end up clearing up pretty quick. I like Jacoby Walter in Baylor. He's a freshman, so not exactly what I would say is typically Monty in this front office's MO, but some solid defense there. He's really pesky, gets a lot of threes up, and he primarily is just a 3-point shooter. But I think the Kings can do a good job of simplifying the game for high IQ players. And there's a couple in this draft that I think as I get more into, I'll have a little bit more detail on some of these guys, but those are the ones that have kind of caught my eye a little bit to start here.
You probably already know this, but for excellent Kings coverage, check out Brenden Nunes, Sactownsports.com. Thank you, Brenden. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate you guys as always. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Keegan is definitely better than Malachi Flynn. Just saying.
Thank you. He got nervous. The word's going to get out, and I didn't say that. When we come back, we'll